Record. Recording. Okay. Hi, and welcome to my latest episode of Mrs. Mummypenny Talks. And it is another episode with a guest. Pretty much all my episodes at the moment, I've got guests now because I have recently in May, June, July time realised that I love doing interviews. I need to go back to what I started doing my podcast as. So I'm back with interviews. And the premise for my interviews is basically to get interesting people onto interview who are running innovative businesses, be that big businesses, small businesses. And what I'm trying to also create is some diversity with my interviews as well. So there'll be a really good balance of men and women, all races, queer, straight, old, young, big companies, small companies. I'm literally going everywhere with my interviews. So today I'd like to welcome, go that way, Patrick Venn, who is the founder of the I was going to say Finance Football Academy. It's the Football Finance Academy. Get it the right way around. And yeah, tell us about you and what you do and how you even got to this point of, tell us your life story.
Yeah, sure. I'll try and keep it a bit short, but thank you so much for having me on. So my name's Patrick Venn, and I'm a money coach, basically. As you can tell by my accent, I'm not originally from the UK. I'm originally Canadian. But I've been in the UK, London for about, it must be 7 years now. And I wasn't always a money coach. I actually started my corporate career. It's been really the vast majority of my corporate career in sports sponsorships. So I worked for Manchester United for about 5 years, where it was my job to bring on brands as official partners of the club. So official soft drinks partner of Man United, official Japanese noodle partner of Manchester United, official anything of Manchester United. That was sort of
what an interesting job. Blimey.
Yeah, so it was very, very interesting. Some incredible memories. Who knows, might write a book about some of the experiences one day if I'm legally allowed.
Probably not.
but it was it was a wonderful experience, really, really great time. And
what years were you at Man United then?
I left about almost a year and a half ago now, so maybe from around 2014, 15.
So the era of, name some football players that it's the era of.
I was in the post Ferguson era, so right after he left, that's when I kind of sort of joined the company as an intern, and then worked there for 5 years with a 1 year stop somewhere else, but came back to join the club. So that was my corporate life, and that was my career, which is a far cry from being a money coach. So how did this kind of happen? So in the background, while I was working at Manchester United, I was going through sort of my own personal finance transformation or journey or whatever you want to call it. And when I started in the corporate world, I had some pretty shocking money habits. I was just not good managing money, my own money at all. I had about 15,000 in student credit card debt, and I was living check to check, no savings, just some really bad fundamentals that I just didn't have. And I distinctly remember one moment where I actually went to a wedding with my then new girlfriend, now fiance, although after this story, I'm surprised we did make it that far. And so we were going to my friend's wedding, and we decided to stop off and get a cash gift to put in an envelope to give to them as a wedding gift. And it was a couple of days before payday. And I remember telling my partner, like, oh, I don't quite have the money. She's like, no problem. Just nick it from your savings and replace it in a few days when you get paid. And my response was, what savings?
Yeah.
Her jaw kind of hit the floor and was just like, what do you mean no savings? And anyway, she had to lend me the money to give as a gift, which you can imagine was like still the most embarrassing experience of my life. But that was the catalyst that kind of got me thinking, okay, kick my butt into gear. I need to start getting control of my money. She wanted to build a life with someone who was sort of financially reliable. And I totally get that. And
it's quite important.
Absolutely.
It's not quite important. It's very important. Speaking from bitter experience, because I built my life with somebody that wasn't financially reliable.
Exactly. And not only that, but like my own daily stress about money, I wanted to alleviate that as well. So that's what launched me on kind of a 4-year mission, going to the blogs, the podcasts, evenings and weekends were about reading about investing and passive investments and things like that. So it was really a 4 year sort of transformation that I completely reversed my situation and now I'm on the path towards financial independence. So it's quite an amazing 4-year switch. And so that's what got me thinking, well, if I learned this stuff, I'm not particularly good at math, I don't really like numbers, I had bad money habits. If I can reverse my situation, anyone can, and hopefully I can save them 4 years' time of doing it. So that's what brought me to being a money coach.
Oh my gosh, we've got like the same mission in life. This is amazing. I mean, completely different, I think, people who we're targeting, but your story pretty much mirrors mine. It's just that I didn't have that financial realization till later in life, because I was in credit card debt until the grand age of 42. From 18 to 42, I just did revolving credit card, and I became so Mrs. Mummypenny started 7 years ago, but a lion's share of running my business, I was living very bad financial habits, but yet preaching, not preaching, that's the wrong word to use, I was guiding all these financial habits people should have, and I wasn't practicing what I was preaching, quite literally. It's really interesting. But your niche then, the people who you're helping, is something that's really, really close to my heart, is footballers. And it's not because I'm remotely interested in football. I am. I've always been a fan of football. Like my dad, oh my God, my dad was a huge Newcastle fan. And my dad used to play for the British Army when he was like a youth. But he broke his leg and it ruined his football career. And then he became a referee. So I learned all the football rules from him when I was a child, because it was the only way I could talk to my dad was about sport. You know, that whole thing of men and what they talk about. But maybe we'll talk about mental health as well. But my son, Dylan, who is nearly 13, is a very, very talented footballer who plays for Cambridge United Academy. So he's in the under-13 squad, but he plays up a year with the under-14s.
Okay.
And I know you know a little bit about Cambridge, but because I know you've had some meetings with them, but it's a really great academy, yeah? They're a feeder into the big clubs, the likes of Arsenal, Tottenham, West Ham. So his future's looking really, really bright, and he's not too far away from it, is he? Like he's nearly 13, so like footballers get signed up when they're sort of 16.
Yeah, that's amazing to hear that he's doing so well in the academy, and on top of that, he's got a sort of a great influence in you to learn some of these money habits. But there are a lot of footballers in those academies that don't have something like that, or a support system, or sort of an at-home education about those things related to money. So that's exactly why we did sort of create the Football Finance Academy, to educate the kids. We usually work with U18s and U23 players. That's the focus for right now. So kind of getting them to think about learning to manage the money before they get the big money, so that when it does arrive and they become basically wealthy overnight, that literally make the right decisions because they've got the education prior to that.
It's so firstly, did you listen to the Louis Theroux Troy Deeney interview that was released last week?
I did not, no.
I highly recommend you listen to it. So Louis Theroux's new podcast. So Troy Deeney, who so he quotes some incredible statistics in his in this podcast about sort of where footballers come from in the UK academy system. So and I know this from Cambridge as well. So Cambridge is very ethnically diverse, very. And there's a huge mixture of backgrounds of the football players. There's a tendency towards quite a lot of self-employed people, because you know the commitment. Like Dylan goes to football training or games 5 days a week, and we could be up in Liverpool, we could be down in Bournemouth, we could be anywhere. So it's a huge, huge commitment as a parent. So it feels like it's only really the self-employed people who have that flexibility to be able to do that. And you need money, right? Because it costs me, and I've worked this out and I've written about it, and it's quite a popular Google post. It costs around £2,000 a year for me to, put fuel in the car, all the football boots. Dylan goes on tour to Germany 2 or 3 times a year, of which I have to pay 250 quid a pop for. The financial structure in the lower league teams is very different to, say, if he was at Arsenal or Tottenham. Everything would be paid for. It would be wonderful. Even they come send a car and pick him up, but it's not like that with the tier 3 football leagues. So but the point I'm trying to get to is there's quite a lot of hardship in the football academy system, because and there's a lot of people that don't have very much money. So you've got this dichotomy now of, it costs all this money to get my child to football training, so a lot of talented boys miss out on it. But then when you get to like the sort of dizzy heights of, I suppose, under 16, under 18, it becomes a bit more serious, and then the clubs do take you more seriously and do financially support you. But then these kids have come from these backgrounds where, they're from like council estates, or they're from other countries. They literally, they don't have a clue how to, their parents didn't know how to manage money, so how do they know how to manage money? And you've just got this building issue of a huge thing of financial education.
Yeah, and the reality is, in football, even if you are at the Arsenals or the Tottenhams, the vast majority of the kids in the academy system won't progress to that Premier League check or that big payday. That's just the simple reality. And so what we wanted to make sure that we did with this program is that regardless of how far they go in the game, we wanted to build these life skills, because at some point, many of these kids are going to transition out of football. And for me, there's genuinely not much more important skill other than sort of reading, writing, and things like that than financial management, something we do every day from, very young until the last days that we have. So we were very conscious of that it wasn't sort of directed at just these sort of players who are going to make it and earn the big salaries, because there are so many, like you just mentioned, who are in the lower leagues, who don't have those resources, who still need to build these skills. And so that's definitely something that we were very, very conscious of when we started.
Yeah. So tell me some of the clubs you work with and sort of what you're doing with them.
Yeah, so this is going to be, coronavirus kind of put a spanner in the works from last season, a couple months ago, this season. So we're looking forward to next season and working with a few clubs. So there are some in the championship level who we have commitments from, some like Luton Town and Derby, which is great. There's a few more on the list, but they're not quite confirmed yet. So we're looking to do as many as we can for next season. But the interesting thing in football is that you have some academies and some football clubs, like you said, who are a bit more ethnically focused than others. And I've been up and down the country prior to COVID, meeting face to face with 20, 25 football clubs, and email exchanges with even more than that. And it's amazing to see sort of the difference of approach that they take. And some are very on board with bringing in new, fresh, innovative ideas for the kids to learn and developing skills outside the pitch. But there's still very many academies that are still entrenched with that. Well, how does that impact his on-field performance? And still very, very focused on, if it's not a footballing cost, do we need it? So it's amazing. And there's range from really, like I said, amazing people that I've met in football who are really helping these kids to the other end of the spectrum, where they look at something like us and say, it just seems like a bit of work to get it in. There's a little bit of a cost to it, and, 20 pounds per kid. So actually maybe we aren't going to do this. So it's been super, super encouraging in one sense, and working with some fantastic clubs, and then a little discouraging on others who maybe aren't as progressive as I'd like to be in developing young kids' skills outside of the game.
But it's something you need to build, right? Because what you're doing, quote me if I'm wrong, but is anybody else doing it?
There are a few. This is what actually I found very interesting when I started digging into this a little further, is there are touch points for players in the youth system and in the full professional system. There are touch points for them to get access to some type of education. But for me, those sources were all somewhat compromised. So there was always an ulterior motive to those sources of information. So whether it was from sponsors who wanted to really get them into buy mortgages and other products from them, it wasn't sort of a pure education. So we made sure that we are like 100% education company. We don't manage, we don't touch, we don't invest. That's not our bag. We don't do that. We're not allowed legally to do that, nor do we want to do that. Our focus was on 100% independent education. We're not a wealth management company who a lot of football clubs invite in to educate the players, and then they leave their business cards and end up harassing the players. I've heard some pretty horror stories on the road meeting all these football clubs. So I've just noticed that there are touch points that exist, but they're either compromised or they're simply outdated. I remember one story I had from one of the banking sponsors coming in to speak to the under 18 lads in the academy. And one of the questions was something around budgeting, and sort of the instructor or whoever was running the session talked about, well, you should forget about those Yeezy trainers. Just go to Sports Direct and buy the 20 quid ones. Well, you tell that to an under 18 footballer just to go to Sports Direct and get the 20 quid pair. It's not really a great solution for them. Getting teased maybe in the dressing room or whatnot. So I think just a little bit was out of touch with some of the youth footballers coming through. So that's what we've tried to do, is reinvent the way it's taught with, young, fresh stories. We have a lot of things comparing sort of Mike Tyson and Jay-Z's money habits and how one kind of became the first rap billionaire and the other one 400 million here in his career and went bankrupt. So, okay, what actions were they doing that brought them into two different paths? So really just trying to, make it more modern and fresh and use examples of how I would have wanted to be taught personal finance at that age as well.
Yeah, and so many footballers have gone bankrupt. So I know that Troy Deeney's had a lot of financial problems. I mean, he's had such a tough upbringing, and I don't think he had any financial education. And he wasn't discovered till he was 18 either. He didn't even think he was very good at football because it was his brother who was the footballer.
I think he was a laborer, either a bricklayer or something like that. I remember
he was a laborer earning like 100 quid a day.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've heard, Paul Merson. Oh my gosh, like his story, it had me in tears when I watched, because he did an interview with Tony Adams on, that program where what's the guy that won I'm a Celebrity? Harry Redknapp. Harry Redknapp did that England-Germany old boys competition. So yeah, Paul Merson and Tony Adams went fishing, and obviously they've both had their respective drug problems and alcohol problems and financial problems. But Paul Merson was a huge gambler, and he literally destroyed his life with gambling. So there's a lot of issues in football, isn't there, around money? So there's lack of financial education, there's gambling, there's huge mental health issues, there's the pressure of this sudden, most famous men in the country, the most idolized men in the country, the media attention, is such, it sounds a ridiculous thing today, but it's such a tough job being a footballer.
It really is. And you mentioned some of those stats. It's actually 40% of Premier League footballers go broke within 5 years of retirement, which is an astonishing number. This was a statistic from a few years ago, so I'm hoping that there was some improvements to that. But it's not just football. It's not just football. In the US as well, 60% of NBA players go broke within 5 years of leaving the league. And the craziest one is in the NFL. The American football is 78% feels some type of financial stress or anxiety within just 3 years of coming out of the system. So although it is a rampant problem in football, it's really a big problem across sport as a whole. But there's the athletes in the US, I think, are starting to learn very much from the horror stories of previous athletes. And they are doing a lot to educate themselves in the young years. And you see some great role models of whether it's LeBron James, who's very, very business savvy, or some of the younger guys coming through. There's one example of a guy named Jason Tatum, who plays for the Boston Celtics, huge star. And he decided to save 100% of his NBA salary for his entire career. And so you might think, well, how's this possible? How's he even living? What's happening here? So he's saving 100% of his MBA salary, but he's spending 100% of his endorsement money. So his
Yeah.
endorsement money pays entirely for his life, and his MBA salary goes to his future. And that's simply because there was a story of him growing up very, very poor, no heat, hot water, electricity, some basic essentials in his house. And he remembers coming home from school one day. He was 11 years old. He remembers this. He walked up the steps and he saw a poster pinned to his doorway, and it was an eviction notice for him and his mom. They couldn't afford to live in the flat. So he sat in the back room crying all night, watching his mom cry all night at the kitchen table. And he made a promise when he was 11 years old. He goes, if I ever make it to the MBA, I will do whatever it takes to make sure that we never go back to that situation again. And the thing is, by spending his endorsement money, he's still he bought his mom a Cadillac Escalade. He bought a Range Rover for himself. He's dressing in fly clothes that he loves. Like, he's not denying himself his hard work and spending his money. He's just being so conscious of how he's deploying it. And it's a great example for young athletes coming through. And that's one of the case studies we use for the young kids in the academy.
That's amazing. And it's so simple, isn't it? It's such, because that's, the problem with financial education, one of the problems with financial education is that people think it's scary and it's complicated and, oh my gosh, it would take me so much time to get my head into it. Yeah, overwhelming. Which, well, we've both experienced those feelings. We've both had bad financial education. That's probably why we are able to do the jobs we do, because I've certainly not experienced having an eviction notice on my door, but I've experienced debt out of control, not being able to pay it back. I've not quite got to the point where I needed to go to a debt counsellor, but I
suffocating feelings. I know that anxiety of that debt hanging over you. I mean, it is paralyzing. It was for me.
And it's a huge cause of mental health issues across, certainly in this country, absolutely in America, and every country's got a different. I was talking to a person who I interviewed last week who lives in Madrid, and he works for Santander in Madrid, and debt isn't so much of a problem in Spain. It's quite interesting how, different. And also I watched an interview with the manager of Juventus, my friend Georgie Frost, who I don't know if you know Georgie. She's a money expert, but she's also a sports journalist.
Okay.
And she interviewed this guy, the manager of Juventus, and he'd be a good person for you to hook up to, because he really had his head screwed on. He was really into the wider, the bigger picture of football management, not just football. But it's the mental health, and let's talk reality, the amount of people who kill themselves because of debt. And mainly men. It's just the hugest, scariest issue in this country is mental health, and financial issues are one of the biggest drivers of it.
Well, it spills out into everything. I know I read a few stats of, money issues being the number one UK work stressor for employees.
Mm-hmm.
How that's not impacting their job performance. Of course it is. Absolutely. It is. When you have that stress and anxiety, it's sort of the same within football. If they're so worried about their off field, whether it's money, whether it's drugs, or whether it's gambling habits, like of course they're not going to be able to focus as much as they want on the football field, and that's going to impact that. So I think the financial just goes so beyond just the numbers. It really is sort of finance. Yeah, money is the resource that we use to construct our life. And so if we're not sort of being conscious with the way, if we, one, don't have the education, or two, not being conscious with how we deploy that resource, of course it can have a wider effect on your life, big time.
I've COVID-19 time has been really interesting for me as a person, because so I've just got divorced, okay, and my ex-husband left just before lockdown started, which we'd split up like a year ago, so we'd had like a really long time of. He's an ex-footballer, interestingly, so who couldn't manage money, but so the genes have all passed down to Dylan. So I can see why he's a good footballer, because, you know, he's got my dad's genes and he's got his father's genes as
Right.
well. But yeah, so he left just before lockdown, and it just initialized this big sort of life detox, life transformation. And of course, the first thing I did was drink a load of alcohol and eat a load of rubbish food. But I was doing a lot of exercise. I immediately started exercising and I lost a load of weight. But what I've also been doing is some work on my mental health, because I sort of realized, you know, after you've come out of a divorce, you need to go see a therapist. Not to take that in jest, I really needed to see a therapist. And we've done some really interesting work. It's not a long-term thing. So the kind of therapy I've gone for is this thing called human-based psychotherapy, which is quite a quick solution to when you've had traumatic events happen to you in your life. So yeah, I did it in May and June, and some of the things it taught me was that life boils down to sort of 9 basic needs, and it's sort of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? So you know Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like it's a very popular, well, it's one of the most famous psychological theories in the world. So these 9 basic needs are things like the need for security, the need for control, the need for privacy, the need for a community, the need for intimacy. There's some of them, I can't remember all of them. But what sort of transpired to me during this therapy was that the need for security and control are core to my being. My parents died when I was a teenager, right? So I had all my security and all of my control completely ripped away from me. So hence they're very, very important. And we've all got very different needs. Now, those needs relate to money, work, relationships, how you parent your children, and everybody around you has got different needs. So when you can have these conversations, and like me sharing with you, Lynn's needs are security and control, and status. Status is quite important to me as well. Then if we figure out what your needs are, suddenly like we understand how each other works, and it's almost like you've then built the base of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you can start to, you know, build yourself up to self-actualization. Amazing. I'm not sure I'll ever reach there, but I'm aiming to.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on a really interesting subject, which is, I think the wider scope of it is sort of money and relationships, and you with your significant other. And yeah, we all need different things in a relationship. You know, my level of security might be different than my partner's level of security or status or any of those number of things. And so it's something I've been talking a lot on kind of Instagram and YouTube as well, which is like the dynamic of money within your relationship and how it affects, it's such a bedrock of how it affects your relationship, your life, your future, how you raise your kids. Like it literally touches on all those different areas, and how important it is to get those cards out on the table early. And my hand was kind of forced in that story that I told you a little bit earlier about, you know, laying it out on the table. But although painful and embarrassing as it was, that was the beginning to start building on those blocks that you were talking about. Okay, what's important to me? Actually starting to have those conversations, because naturally as a guy, maybe that doesn't come out as maybe easily as it did for my partner. Again, that's a bit of a stereotype, so I don't want to pigeonhole everyone, but that was our situation. It was harder for me to do that. So just by, you know, that embarrassing experience, laying the cards on the table and start saying, okay, what are those needs? What are those hierarchy of needs that are important to us? That is no doubt really strengthened our relationship. And it wasn't very intentional. It kind of happened organically. It wasn't sort of a plan or a ploy or a plot. It was just unfolded that way. And it's had a massive positive impact. And I still think the conversation about money with your partner or at home with your parents and kids, I still think it's quite a closed conversation, which it was in my household growing up. And
taboo, isn't it? It's a taboo subject that people are scared to talk about. The first time I ever told the world, you know, via Mrs. Mummypenny or YouTube, whatever, what I earned was quite a scary thing. And now I just like Yeah, I used to earn 80 grand a year in my last corporate job. I don't care. I just say it.
It's like saying what you had for breakfast or dinner. Yeah, it just becomes part of the
Whatever.
natural. Yeah,
Yeah.
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 And when you do
Um,
talk about it more, it does sort of it like de-weaponizes that thing. It just makes it seem less scary when you
yeah.
talk about it.
And do you follow Brené Brown?
No, I don't think so.
Oh my gosh, she's amazing. She's like my
You've given
goddess.
me a lot of tips on here. There's names that I've been writing down throughout this whole thing
Yeah.
to make sure that I go check out.
I'm a huge podcast listener of like podcasts that are actually going to teach me stuff, and also podcasts that will make me laugh. But and I just love listening to interview podcasts. So hence Louis Theroux's brilliant, but Brené Brown, she started her podcast at the beginning of COVID. And she interviews the most incredible people, like you would not believe. But she's an American research scientist. She's very famous for her TED Talk. So if you search Brené Brown TED Talk, watch that. And she's a professor of vulnerability. So she studies the impact on people when they demonstrate vulnerability. And I just adore it. And it's almost like the core of my business model is I share my vulnerability. I tell everyone of the stupid things I've done in my life, and there's a lot. I've also made some really sensible decisions as well, just to balance it out. Life is about balance. And because you said exactly the same thing earlier, I just don't want people to make the same mistakes that I did. It's as simple as that. And when you demonstrate that vulnerability and truth, then people just are like, oh my God, thank God I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one who got 16 grand into debt. I'm not the only one who had a stupid obsession with buying Prada. Um,
Yeah. And
it's,
it's even more authentic and powerful nowadays because everyone has that glossy finish on their Instagram profiles and their Facebook profiles. So I think it even, you know, I always said like the phrase, the keeping up with the Joneses, that used to be your neighbor to your left and right. And now it's hundreds of people that you do follow online who literally feel like everyone can afford everything all of the time. Everyone's on a vacation, everyone's on a new car, everyone's bought a new this and that. So it's even more important, that authentic, to cut through the glossy finish that I think a lot of people see, and actually be vulnerable. And those are the way we learn, right? This is through other people's and your own mistakes, really. So I think there's no wonder it's a success when everyone gives a TED talk or develops a coaching business or something and shares their own vulnerable story. It connects you with people because we've all been in those situations, maybe not identical to the one you talk about, but certainly aspects of it you can totally relate to.
yeah, no, absolutely. Oh God, this is a good conversation. What time is it? It's okay, we've got 10 more minutes. Okay, so what's your year looking like then for your business, and sort of what's next?
Yeah, so we're planning right now in the summer for the upcoming next season for football
Yep.
academies and what their
Our
speaker
football
programs.
season starts on Thursday.
Yes, exactly. So
Virtually.
yeah.
Yeah.
So this is a big moment in time, the next month or so, really gearing up and starting to work with a lot more clubs for the next season and developing the speaker series for them. And so also on top of that, we've decided to give a in-person workshop, but also a digital online classroom with the same content.
Good idea.
So clubs now, actually some have the choice because some really prefer the in-person, like come in, make an impact, connect with these kids, like that'll be super, super helpful. Whereas other clubs are saying, actually, we're still maybe feeling the effects of COVID. We'd love to give them on-demand videos they can do at their own leisure, and we can see how they're tracking their performance. We can create quizzes after it. So it's just a different dynamic, each of them. It's the same relative content delivered in two different ways. So that's what we're working for right now, is just getting up the online product, making sure that's flying, and then also delivering the in-person workshop. So that's what's taking over the summer. And then on top of that, we also
do one-to-one coaching.
So yeah, that's already in the works. What we do is work with players who are maybe at a level. I wouldn't take on a one-on-one coaching client if they were sort of earning some of the salaries that the U18 kids do. That's just not fair. It's not a good way for them to use their money, but it's more for the U23s or first team players who can afford to do this and want to invest in their own education. I'm totally on board for that. So yeah, we do the one-on-one coaching as well. We also do that one-on-one coaching with young professionals as well to help them master their money. So we do work with pro athletes, but also with young corporates as well.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Ah, and that's a fee-based thing, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. So we do eight private one-on-one coaching sessions through Zoom, just like this. And then I have about 15 tools that I've built that I actually give lifetime access to my clients. So what my goal is that when our 8 sessions are done together, you don't need me anymore. I've done my job. If I've coached myself out of you needing me in your life, you now have a financial system that runs on autopilot, is automated and heading towards your goals. And then you can use all those 15 tools that I've given to sort of in a few years' time, if you want to just check your financial health, you can revisit those tools and use them over and over and over again. So the idea is to pass on full power to the client so that they just feel empowered to go on for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years, invest, grow their money, and just develop some really, really good money habits.
Yeah, and of course, I wanted to touch on diversification of income actually, because it's a conversation I have with my eldest quite often, because you go out for a hike every day, right?
Right.
That's just how we've lived through like COVID, isn't it? And I live out in Hertfordshire. Okay, I've got fields on my doorstep practically, and wood. Lovely. And streams. I'm very grateful for where I live. And so we go out and do these walks. And we had a conversation a few weeks ago about the importance of a plan A and a plan B and a plan C. The importance of education, and also if he does make it as a footballer, I know that the chances are not that high, but I also know that he's good and he's very focused, and everybody is telling me he is good. He is the type of boy that will make it. I sound like a really cocky mum there, but I'm just saying what the coaches are telling me, and also like Arsenal, Tottenham, West Ham coaches are all saying the same thing. So anyway, but he's signed to Cambridge. He's not going anywhere else. I have a say in that. So if he does make it as a footballer, right, and he ends up playing for Tottenham or Arsenal, would be really handy because that's near to where I live. And he suddenly got all this money. We were just talking about the different things he could do to diversify his income as a footballer. So we're talking about, and it's very similar to what I do as well. Like my income is hugely diversified. So I work with lots of different brands. Obviously social media is very lucrative. Ronaldo is the richest Instagram star on the planet. So what does that say about football and social media? There's just so many. And then he can do public speaking, he can do charity work. There's so many ways you can really spread the money when you're a footballer, because inevitably your career is going to end when you're 32, 33, if you're lucky, if not before, and you get injured. So you need to have all those other strings in your bow to, is that the right phrase?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think traditionally, and even still going on now, I see it is that there's one way that footballers diversify their income is they buy property. That's the one thing. Yeah. And it can be a sound investment. Don't get me wrong. Property can be a wonderful way. But
not at the moment, it's not a great investment.
Right. And I think that the idea of, house prices always go up. I think those people who lived through 08 and things like that have very much understood that actually maybe the word safe as houses isn't as a phrase safe as houses isn't as safe as we thought. So it can be a wonderful way to diversify your income. But like I say, that's one way. And you've touched on several that you can do. I think the key is for those kids or those young players coming through is just to taste a lot of different things and figure out what they do like. I gravitate towards social media and like it, or actually it's not something I really like? Do I gravitate towards speaking? Actually, maybe that's something I really do like. So encouraging them to taste as many different things. And I really, really, truly believe, and some footballers have been writing about it recently, is the development of off-field interests will impact your football in a positive way, because it's such a pressure cooker environment that you talked about earlier. So much stress, pressure to perform every week. And if I know there are some people like Ronaldo who just can be laser focused, and that's the only thing they sort of focus on becoming, is the best in the world. But most players aren't like that, and they need some type of outlet or some type of creativity that they actually use to unplug from that pressure cooker environment. So by going around and tasting all those different things that they might enjoy and start thinking about that now, I think is a brilliant idea, because just like your father's career, like it can be over in a split second with a leg break. That's something that's totally out of your control. Nothing to do with you, your performance and your ability, nothing. It's out of your control. So I do like the idea of thinking about those things now. It feels weird, I think, for young people to think about like plan A, B, C when I'm 40, but I think it's just getting them to understand that there are things that, like outside your football, that develop other interests, and it can actually help you build a well-rounded life and actually improve your on-field performance as well.
Yeah, and particularly important because there'll be loads of parents of academy children watching this interview. I know, because I'll send everybody I know, and I've got quite a good network of parents. The importance of education, right? I cannot emphasize it enough. School is always first, always. And I've got into a little bit of trouble with the school that my son goes to, because I've needed to like pull him out of school for a day for him to go on tour to Germany, and they're like, we're not approving it. School is more important than football. I'm like, but it's academy football. And they're like, we don't care. School is more important than football. And it's the right thing to say. It's a completely fair point. Education is extremely important, and my concern with that is what on earth happens at the age of 16. So Dylan does his GCSEs and gets some really good results, and then he's still really good at football, and let's say he gets offered a the thing that happens between 16 and 18, like the apprenticeship. What happens to his education there? Because I want him to stay at the school he's at now, which is a really good school, and sixth form college, where you do your A levels. I don't want him to be sent off to some place in Cambridge to have education, which I don't know what the education's like, but I'm guessing it won't be as good as the school he's at now, because I don't want that to happen. And also, is he going to get an opportunity to go to university? Like, I went to university and it made me as a person, and it launched my career. So, it's just all these things coming up that are really stressing me out.
Yeah. And I mean, again, every academy is different, and the levels obviously provide you with different options, but I know several scenarios that can happen. If the academy does have an in-house school, if they're that sort of elite category 1, they can sort of go into that academy school. I've seen situations where you do 50-50 joint time. So actually 50% of your work will be done at the school that's closest to you now, the one he's in, and then 50% of the work at the academy. And those two bodies work together to make sure they're holistically providing what they need. There's also a level, if you get to a certain level within the academy, you could start looking at different BTEC levels, certificates and diplomas, maybe within sport, something that you obviously like. And then there's the option also, which I think a lot of parents forget in the UK is, and it's a bit scarier one, but the idea of getting a full scholarship in America to play football. I mean, I know personally 2 or 3 people who've done that, and they were at Huddersfield Town on the brink of making it, and they didn't quite. And I know it might not be for everyone, sending a kid to the US. I know it might not be for everyone, absolutely, but I know there's some amazing opportunities that were developed from some people that I know that were based in Leeds, played for Huddersfield, and went to play at Brown University on a full scholarship. I mean, that's $100,000 education that was covered for. Because the quality of football in those universities compared to the academies here in the UK, I mean, is just you can't quite. The balance is huge, the difference of level is huge. So those people who perform in the academies over here can fit in quite nicely to the US program. So again, it's not an option for everyone, but the point I'm trying to make is there's a gambit of options that you can choose from to use football to your advantage and get an education.
But I used to work with a guy who I worked with him at EE. He was a youth star at Stevenage. I think he was the goalie at Stevenage. How old is he? Sort of same age as me. And he was like, no way am I becoming a full-time Stevenage player. I want my degree. And he's now like a financial controller of like a huge company. So he made the right decision. But what it also did was he carried on playing for Stevenage, right? And but he did his degree at the University of Hertfordshire. So, you know, it was all pretty close. And he lived in Hertfordshire somewhere. But actually, his football career ended because, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of Stevenage anyway, for other reasons. I know a lot about how they work. And they're not very ethnically diverse, just to point that one out. But he lost his football career because I don't know if it was that you're focused on your education as well as your football, and you should be 100% focused on your football. I mean, we're talking 20 years ago, so it was different times. But I want my children to have the option of going to university.
And there's wonderful examples of people in the game who have done that. I think Vincent Kompany is probably the best example, who actually got his business degree from the University of Manchester while he was playing in Manchester City's first team. So he was doing that in tandem. Or maybe something that hits a little bit closer to home for you is that I've had the pleasure of speaking with Harrison Dunk a few times, who's on
he's a lovely guy.
United. He's a fantastic guy, really good footballer. I think he's been there several years at the club, but he's also now training to be a full-time like solicitor as well, a law degree.
Oh my God.
So he actually has a fantastic article that he wrote on LinkedIn about footballers needing to develop the off-field skills and not sort of, you know, holding the Ronaldos and just that sole tunnel focused of sort of football only. But there's examples from like the top of the game to more league level 3, level 4, league 1, league 2, examples of people who do those things in tandem. And I think one thing I've heard a lot from academy directors meeting them is that when they get in that level of like U23, when they're on the brink, there's so much downtime that they have, a lot of them, because they're in this weird that they're not quite full-blown first team professionals, but they're also not U16 still doing school on the side. They're kind of they're in that transition phase. So when training's done, and some of them are on very, very good salaries at some of the clubs in that U23 level, is that they're finding it a challenge to actually fill up their time and schedule with some things that are productive. And that's where you can slip into that trap of those Paul Mersons of so much time on your hands, and you actually do have quite a bit of money in your pocket. And that's where it can lead to, if you don't channel that energy at that age into something positive, whether it's football, studying education, developing a hobby, playing the drums, whatever it may be that's your interest, that's kind of a bit of a vulnerable position that I've kind of seen clubs identify of not having that much, having too much spare time and free time.
Yeah. Wow. That was just the most educational and interesting conversation for me personally.
Yeah. I hope there's some, academy moms and dads out there potentially listening who can get value from this as well.
Yeah, because do you know what? It's really difficult being an academy parent. It's such a huge commitment, and all I want to do is support my child to do the best that he possibly can, the best he wants to do, the best he wants to be, and there's an element of I'll pay whatever it takes to get him there. I mean, I'm grateful that I can afford it. Although some like free football boots, Adidas, Nike, if you're watching, would be really nice. Or maybe like West Ham or Tottenham or Arsenal, just send me some free football boots. It's fine. He's a size 7 now. Like, I have to buy him adult bloody shoes and boots.
Yeah, I had 2 older brothers. I was the youngest, so I always got the constant hand-me-downs. I don't think I ever got anything new sports related until I was about 17. But hey, it was all broken in. It was all right. It was better. It was better in my eyes. At least I tell myself that.
Poor my Jack, my youngest, does get a lot of hand-me-downs. Okay, so right, we'll close off. How do people find you on social media and everything?
Yeah, so the two places that I live are Instagram and YouTube, and it's just Patrick Venn, Venn. Also, the footballfinanceacademy.com is the website where you can get a bit more information on the one-on-one coaching, or also academies that they can sort of contact us as well to start booking in speaker sessions, either digital or in person, for next season.
Amazing. That's nice and simple. You've kept it. I do everything. Like, sometimes it feels too much, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I think we can always get pulled in a lot of different directions. I've been guilty of that as well. So
but I love Instagram. Instagram's probably my favorite social media, and I detest Facebook. I know they're owned by the same people, but I just detest Facebook. Anyway, that's a whole nother story. Right, it was wonderful to speak to you. Thank you so much for coming on. That was really, really interesting, and I think a lot of people will be really interested in this.
Thanks a lot. I really appreciate your time, and
it will work really well on LinkedIn, because I've got so many football connections on LinkedIn from Cambridge. So yeah, cool. Lovely. Right, I will stop recording. Thank you very much, but you stay there.